impetus behind Gorilla and why didn't it succeed?
I'll tell you why it didn't succeed.
Okay.
So,
there we go.
Image had taken off, and so a bunch of us writer guys, like Carl Kiesel and me and Kurt Busiek and others I'm forgetting, decided we would do sort of a writer-oriented, with strong artists, a writer-oriented, create our own line like that. This is
2000 or so.
2000, so yeah, 99 something. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. And we went on our own. We went under Image, but we went on our own. And we spent a great deal of money on promotion because our publisher had worked out a deal with some sort of entrepreneur, some sort of big like money man, some sort of venture capitalist. So he was funding a lot of this stuff. So we're doing big displays at conventions, and we were going to be really big with our comics, and we were going to do huge print runs and stuff. And we wanted to meet the venture capitalist, and he was always busy doing this, he was always busy doing that. The day before our first issue launched, the truth came out that the publisher actually had lost that venture capitalist way early on. And so he had been funding a lot of that stuff himself.
Whoops.
Wait, here's the Twilight Zone part. He was also my agent.
Oh, gosh.
So I was the mystery benefactor of Guerrilla Comics and didn't know it. So we had to make the call at that point, do we keep going or not? And we just couldn't justify it. The problem when you get a bunch of creative people to run a company is nobody's good at that. This is not what we do. I could do it now, but I couldn't do it then, and Kurt Busiek couldn't do it then, and we all just did. We didn't know what we were doing. I lost something like $30,000 on the first issue of Empire, even though it sold 60,000 copies. We didn't know what we were doing.
Well, at least you got to finish it at DC, which became a collection, which has been reprinted by other people since.
Yeah.
And, someday you and Barry will get back to that.
We plan to, actually. So we're going to try to do a Kickstarter next year.
Really? Oh, nice.
Try to. That word try is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sense.
and yet, after that experience, you willingly go to work at CrossCheck.
I know. Oh my God. All right, so, because again, I'm not shy about telling stories out of school. The company was run by a gentleman who had fallen into a huge amount of money. So he'd done some startup company and he sold it to Ross Perot, and for millions and millions of dollars. He and his cousin really wanted to do a comics company because they sat around the pool when they were teenagers and came up with a bunch of mythology and a bunch of ideas, which are good, but that's okay. And they did something that on paper was good. They hired a bunch of creative people from all over the states, and they, instead of working with a freelance model, they had an office building in Clearwater, Florida, home of Scientology. And speaking of cults, as we are, and they had already moved there. So if you worked at CrossCheck, you had to work in the building. And they hired, Steve Niven and Steve Epting and just, so many really
not top-notch artists
and stuff. And Barbara Kiesel was there, Mark March was there,
Greg Land,
and this fellow who ran the company really wanted me to come in as the editor-in-chief, and I thought it was very flattering. But I was nervous. I had a lot of freelance work. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. It had been a huge move. But we had a lot of conversations, and everything was good. We walked around the parking lot. He talked me into it, and one of the reasons I knew I could do it is because he was a very volatile human being, but his wife was the leavening part. She was the one I liked him, loved her.
Right.
And she was the one who was, as I used to say, the tiles on the space shuttle, right? The one that wouldn't sew
the heat shield,
the heat shield on the space shuttle. So I finally take the job on a Sunday and I fly back home to Brooklyn. On Monday, she drops dead of a heart attack. It's terrible. It's unfortunate. And so, we didn't know each other so well that I was really overwhelmed. But now I'm committed to a guy who's incredibly volatile. And that lasted for about 6 months until I realized, oh my God, I can't. He was a billionaire, and billionaires don't like being told no. He liked having me on his shoulder like Jiminy Cricket because it made him feel like he was like he could take direction, like he didn't want a yes man around. He said, but they all want yes men around. I didn't think he did, but he did. And so I lasted for about 6 months as the guy who would tell him no until he just got tired of hearing me told no. And then it was just, I gotta get out of here.
But we did get Ruse out of it.
We did get
It was
Ruse
a
out
fun
of it.
book with Jackson.
I'm proud of the work I did there. It just, and then, you know, I left and then eventually come to crash and burned. So not because I left, but it would have crashed and burned no matter what.
So one of the things I'm picking up and looking and preparing for this conversation was the fact
I
that
leave a lot of jobs.
but you also see opportunities that others don't necessarily, such as Guerrilla.
Right.
And then as digital is coming online, you see a potential future that not anyone, you know, Scott McCloud saw it and no one else did.
Right.
Then you come up with Thrillbit.
Yeah.
That, well, you were ahead of the curve. Why did that not work?
First off, we were way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
The deal with Thrillbit, I don't know if anybody ever saw the Thrillbit website.
Those
or saw
familiar?
comics. Six was great. But the idea was to do comics on, this is 10 years ago, doing comics on the internet that, as I insisted, weren't see, digital comics basically are pictures of comic books, is what they are. And I thought, well, you need to use the internet and the web capabilities in a way that makes that medium unique. So you still do comics, but you use the tools that you can use with digital. Even something just as simple as with digital, you can do surprises on every screen. You know, like with a comic, right, you can only do a surprise on the left-hand page when you turn the page, because you're looking at the whole thing. Whereas on a digital screen, you can have jump scares wherever you want. That's one tiny example, but there's a lot of examples of ways you can use it in a way that you couldn't use regular comics. So John Rogers, who was the co-creator of Blue Beetle and TV show called Leverage, smart guy, love that guy, went in together on this. I did a series with Peter Krause called Insufferable. I did a few other things there. John did a bunch of stuff. We hired a bunch of different people. Because the deal was, if you got a digital comic that you want online, we'll put it on, you know, we just want to build a Big Ten.
You were Webtoons before Webtoons.
Yeah, exactly. Just come on, we'll give you a cut. You know, we'll work out a deal where you get, you know, more than your fair share of stuff. We just want to have a Big Ten. And it lasted for a couple of years. We couldn't figure out how to monetize it really well, because we were still, the Kickstarter model had not even been a flicker in anybody's eyes yet. Crowdfunding was the dream, but nobody knew how to do it. And John and I couldn't crack that nut. We couldn't square that circle. And then he has a day job, I got a day job. So it eventually just sort of faded out. But we made opportunities for a lot of guys, a lot of ladies, and a lot of folks to do stuff beyond that.
So you have seen these opportunities. What's ahead? Well, what do you see coming down the road?
No, I mean, I've even owned a comic shop, as you know.
Right, that's true.
Which I do not recommend. You can.
There's no money in comics.
You can buy a comic shop if you want, but my advice is just to soak that money in gasoline and set it on fire. Much easier, much faster. I lost so much money on the store, I didn't have to pay income tax for 3 years. So, I mean, I don't know. I was a publisher at Humanoids for a couple of years, most recently. I really need to just sit down and figure out, there's got to be some sort of unified field theory of comics. Yeah. And it's got to be up here somewhere. And I've got to sit down and figure that out. But I just don't know.
Because you look at the comic book field today, you got a lot of smaller publishers starting up, and they're trying different models. None of them seem to be clicking quite yet.
Yeah.
You know, there's one guy out there saying we're never going to do digital. Okay, so leave the money alone. Right. And then other people doing, you know, working with high-end creators, and the product comes out drips and drips, so it's hard to build up a publishing line. And yet the mainstream publishers seem to be living in time of varied covers and spin-offs.
Yeah, totally.
And that's not sustainable.
It is super
That's the 90s again.
It is super not sustainable. I really wish they would change it. I don't know what you're changing to, but I don't know. I mean, I think there'll always be DC Comics. I think there'll always be Marvel Comics, but some of that is wishful thinking. But I really want there to be. But I think just in the big picture, I've always said the crowdfunding. I've been saying this for 15 years. Crowdfunding is the way forward, because what you do with that is, how many people have heard of the KISS Army?
Yeah.
So, yeah, KISS was, the band was a forerunner in all this. They basically built a fan base that they called the KISS Army. It was, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. And you could then count on those people, as long as you kept a relationship with them, at the band, between them and the band, to then buy your albums, go to your concerts, buy your merch and stuff. And so that was a built-in audience. And that's still, to me, the dream model, because I genuinely believe that, by and large, most people, most consumers, would rather give their money directly to the creative people than to Sony, who they know they will give a tiny piece of it to the creator. I think they would rather support creators directly. So with the internet, we've been much more able to create those relationships. And that's why Kickstarters are doing so well. You saw Khalid's Kickstarter.
Oh God, yes.
The Good Omens Kickstarter, which came in at $3 million.
And this is after the publishers didn't want to give her an advance to live on to be able to spend the 2 years it'll take to do this adaptation.
Right.
And that'll teach the publishers.
Yes, hopefully. So I think that's more the model forward. There's a company called Zoop.
Yeah.
That I really like. They are not a crowdfunder. What they do is they facilitate crowdfunding. Because here's the thing about Kickstarter. Running a Kickstarter, I've not done it.
I've done 3, so.
You know, it is a massive, massive undertaking.
Yes.
There's so many details that you don't realize going in, but everything from sitting in your garage, just putting address labels on stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Zoop does all that stuff for you. So I'm trying to work with them to connect with other creators and see if, you know, it makes it easier for other creators to join in the crowdfunding space, so they don't have to worry about sitting in their garage at 2 in the morning putting address labels on stuff, and they can create stuff.
Okay. The 32-page comic book is now $4.99 in the current solicitations, and I'm thinking, you know, the disposable cash these days to buy these books, and then, you know, to chase all the variants.
I know.
I don't know how people, you know, buy the comics
We have an increasingly smaller audience for superhero comics. I mean,
yes.
That's, you know, if anybody tells you, oh, comics are dying, they are so not dying. Not as long as Raina Telgemeier is alive, comics are not dying.
Still the best-selling graphic novelist in the business.
Exactly. Next to, and Dad Kilkey is up there too,
yeah, right.
The guy who does Dogman stuff. That stuff, you wouldn't believe how much that stuff sells. But since we don't talk about it in the comic book community, it becomes invisible. So, you know, I don't know how to make that leap. I don't know how to make that leap to Scholastic. I don't know how to make that leap to Random House. Mm-hmm. But I do think that's the direction we're going. I think that, like you, we've been saying this for 30 years, that the 32-page thing is not sustainable, and yet we're still doing it. I don't know.
Okay. So that's the business side of Mark.
Yeah.
Let's talk superheroes. Let's talk comic book stories. Let's talk the characters. You know, you mentioned you would only work for Marvel if you got Captain America. You had 2 runs.
Yeah.
2 significant runs. With the first one, Ron Garney, and then Chris Samney.
Yep.
Well, you know, how are they different? How did they compare?
Actually, I had 4 bites of the apple. Did you count?
Because the comeback after the Heroes
Ron Garney did the first 11, and then they took off for a year with the Heroes Initiative stuff, and we came back for a while.
Right.
And then I did that Man at a Time miniseries.
Oh, right.
And then I did 6 issues with Chris Samney, which I didn't originally want to do, because I thought I don't like going back to characters that I've already done, because it's really dangerous, because all you people will just go, oh, I like this older stuff better. You're not just competing with the old work, you're competing with people's nostalgia for the older work. So, which is why you will never see me write Wally West ever again, as much as I love that character. And anyone who can't, but Chris Samney wanted to point out. Right. Well, there's my safety net right there. Everybody's going to love it no matter what, because Chris is doing it. But there's just something about that character. He's the most DC character of the Marvel characters, because he's an adult. He's hopeful. He's proactive. He doesn't whine. You know, he's not up his own butt. He's doing his stuff, and that's why it appealed to me when I was a kid.
Is that because you enjoyed working with Chris so much? Is that how Black Widow came to be?
Yeah. Chris just wanted to do something that was just cutting loose. It was actually Daredevil was first, right? Daredevil, and then Black Widow, and then I think Cap. And Chris just had a bunch of ideas. And Chris, this gets back to the collaborative nature. When I was first working with Chris on Daredevil, I would do tight scripts like I do with most artists, like panel, dialogue. But as you look at Chris and you realize what a great storyteller he is and how he envisions things and choreographs things in his mind and on the page, then I just pull back and we would get on the phone and we would talk about stories. I'd still do, finished dialogue and still write a couple paragraphs for a plot to an editor to look at it, but, hand him the keys. And with Black Widow, that first issue in particular, that was all Chris. I think I just added like 2 balloons of dialogue and took half the money.
You've worked repeatedly with some of the same artists.
Yeah.
How do those collaborations work?
You kiss their ass as much as humanly possible, so they don't leave you. Dan Moore, don't ever leave me. But I mean, they work because you try to build a bond with those people. They make it clear they're not working for you. They're not an art robot. That's.
So, who are the artists who, if they called you tomorrow and said, "Hey, I want to do this with you," who would you say yes to?
That's a good question. I mean, I've been so lucky to work with so many people. I've not worked with John Romita Jr., which I would love to do. And there's a bunch of up-and-comers. I mean, again, and Fiona Staples. If Fiona Staples called me in a heartbeat. Who have I not worked with that I would love to work with? Because all the guys you and I love are dead. Not all of them, but most of the ones we grew up on, they're long gone. Mark Buckingham and I have not really.
Okay.
That's a choice. I love
Mark.
I look specifically in art for whichever does not carry. So the center of my comic book art universe is Kurt Swan, who is my favorite comic book artist of all time. So basically, you start with Kurt Swan and you move outward. I need somebody who has clean lines and storytelling like a Chris Somney, not somebody who does a lot of noodling on the page, which is fine, which is great. I'm not judging. But I'm just saying the Jim Lee style does not attract me personally, even